Thank you, Mr. Di Stefano, for joining me today. I would like to ask a question on one of the projects that you are involved in regarding the Lockerbie matter back in 1988. You planned a docufiction on the Lockerbie case as you acted for Mr. Al Megrahi, and it was Colonel Gaddafi who asked you to intervene. So tell what really happened.
Thank you for the question. In order to understand the situation, there is a timeline and what I would call the dramatis personae, the players in this game here. Now, what we know for a fact is that on the 3rd of May 2000, 11 years after the Lockerbie bombing, the trial started of Mr. Al Megrahi and Mr. Lahin Khalifi Fimar. There were two people indicted. They were thinking of doing a third person as well, but they couldn't quite provide the evidence, and therefore there only two remained indicted. The allegations were a number of counts of murder, conspiracy to murder as an alternative count, and ironically, which not many people know, a breach of the Aviation Securities Act 1982, of which if they were convicted and cleared of murder and that, it would have been a maximum of 2 years imprisonment. Why they chose to do that, heaven only knows. Now, who were the players in all of this there and what happened? As we know, this was held at Camp Zeist, which is an old American site in the Netherlands. And for the purposes of everything, that became Scotland for a while. An agreement had been reached, between John Major, as it was then at the time, and Colonel Gaddafi for a trial to be held at some place. Now, I know for a fact that in 1994, President Mandela offered South Africa. Let's have South Africa as a site for that, but Major turned it down. In 1997, Mandela came to meet Blair again and said, listen, you can't have a trial, wherever you want it. You have to satisfy the Libyans as well, that they're going to get justice. But Blair was having none of this whatsoever. So it was then decided that it was either somewhere or nowhere. And it happened to be Camp Zeist and that, and everybody was happy. In 1999, after receiving assurances from America and from the United Kingdom, Colonel Gaddafi surrendered Al Megrahi and Mr. Fimar to the Netherlands. Now, those are the basic facts there. But what is interesting about all of this is that it was already pre-decided. An agreement had been reached in 1999 between the United States, the UK, and ironically Colonel Gaddafi as well, that out of the two people indicted, one would go free and one would remain in prison. That was an agreement that had been reached there, and it was sanctioned by the court. One of the justices of the judiciary, the High Court of Judiciary, the Scottish judges, wasn't happy about that, but he had to toe the line as well because it was a government decision. Now, who was in government at the time? Let's have a look at some of the players there. So, in the United Kingdom, it was your old Tony Blair. Who was the foreign secretary that was party to the transaction and party to the agreement? Robin Cook. Now, did I not write a story about the mysterious death of Robin Cook in 2005? Why? Walking, he just decided to have a heart attack and die. That's something, yes, it does happen, but it's a little bit suspicious that there. So I wrote the story, Who Killed Cock Robin? But the reasons as to why that happened is yet to come. What about in Scotland? Who was the first minister? The first minister was Donald Dewar. Would it surprise you to know that on the 11th of October 2000, Donald Dewar went out for a walk, fell, hit his head, and the next day he died of a cerebral hemorrhage? Well, probably not, because there's a lot of deaths in this matter here. The problem was that Donald Dewar wasn't happy about the situation. He'd been forced into the situation, accepting that one had to get away and one would pay the price there. Cook equally wasn't happy. He waited some time before that. He said, look, this is not correct. We entered into an agreement, a preordained situation whereby Gaddafi would then surrender two people. One would go home and one would stay in prison, satisfying his people and satisfying your people. That's the agreement that was reached there with Clinton as well. And who was the Secretary of State for Clinton? It's our dear old friend, Madeleine Albright. But we know a little bit about her later on, what she got up to in Serbia and everything there, what she'd been up to and what situation that, very, very strange conduct and behavior with apartments and young men and etc., etc. Now, being moralistic doesn't mean that you do something illegal, but it's already a cause for concern there. What about Colonel Gaddafi? Well, Colonel Gaddafi, of course, had to die as well, because if he didn't die, he could very easily tell the story and say, listen, I surrendered two of my people, and two of the people were there on the basis that one would be acquitted and one would be convicted. So it wasn't really a proper case, which is why he lost his appeal, Mr. Al Megrahi, and which is why at the trial, at the reconstruction of what we do, this is going to come to light. There are two deaths, very suspicious deaths, two top people, Robin Cook and Donald Dewar, in very facsimile situations there. I know that agreement was made because Gaddafi told me when he instructed me on doing the case for Al Megrahi. And when I acted for Saddam Hussein, I had long conversations with him, with Aisha, with his daughter, and with his son. So I know what went on, and I know why it was necessary for Colonel Gaddafi to be murdered by the state. And I'm not talking about the Libyan state. The Libyans were just puppets. They were just used for a purpose. But it was to make sure that that kind of deal never came out. Well, now it's come out, and I'm calling for an investigation now into all the paperwork, even the covert paperwork. There's some we already picked up in Tripoli. There's come to light, and I want a re-examination of Donald Dewar's death and Robin Cook's death. Now, whether that pleases people or not, they are extremely suspicious based upon the evidence and based upon the situation that I've said. Al Megrahi and FEMA they never had a trial. It wasn't a trial. It was just something that was preordained. One had to be found guilty. One had to be acquitted. I mean, they're either both guilty or both not guilty. You can't have it, that, because the roles they played were facsimile, relied upon each other. That is the situation. And I will be writing to the current Prime Minister to make sure that there is now a proper inquiry into the after effects of Lockerbie. I have no idea who did that. I was almost caught on that plane myself there, but for a grace of God, we took a flight to Washington instead of that one. Otherwise, there would be no conversation today. But that doesn't mean that the state can get away with its skullduggery that it has. And the deaths of eminent and respectable people like Donald Dewar and Robin Cook have to now be looked into carefully.
Thank you, Giovanni. That was very interesting indeed, and we look forward to hearing from you again in the near future.